Hi, GED students. Today we are going to tackle question 1 of our practice test series for social studies. So let's take a look at this question we've got here. Um, the very first thing I am noticing is that there are 3 pages of documents here. So please make sure you always are aware of that. That often is the case, especially in social studies and language arts. And sometimes there's even a slider bar and the writing continues down. It looks like in this one we have no slider bar. Let's take a look at our question. Which statement correctly describes an important way that the process of amending the U.S. Constitution is different from the process of creating federal laws? Now, when I look over at the chart on the left here, I notice 4 methods of amending the U.S. Constitution. I don't see anything about the process of creating federal laws. However, when I look at the answer choices, they're all talking about just the amendment process versus the creation of laws. So, honestly, it's okay if you don't know how federal laws are created. You just need to find an answer choice that is verifiable by looking at this chart. I'm going to peek at page 2 and page 3 to see if there's any info that I might need. And I kind of notice, page 3 here is some reasons that they are going through reform. Page 2 is kind of just, a summary of how the 17th Amendment came to pass in the history of it. So, page 1 is all we need at this point for this question. Let's look at the answer choices. Only one government branch is involved in the amendment process. Okay, eek, right here. We need to know what the government branches are. Now, this is one piece of background info that you will need. Most of the questions on the social studies test, honestly, they give you all the information you need to answer, but you do have to throw in some little bits of background knowledge. So let's go ahead and let's recall what the 3 branches are. We've got the first branch of government is the executive. The second is the legislative. And the third branch is the judicial. Executive refers to the president. And legislative refers to the lawmaking body. And I remember that in my head because they both start with L. And legislative, it comes from a root word that has to do with laws. So the lawmaking body or bodies are in Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Those 2 bodies are the legislative bodies. So that leaves us with judicial, which is the judges. You can kind of see how judicial has the word judge in there, comes from the same root, and that is the Supreme Court. Okay. And all the lower courts as well. But when we think of the highest judicial body, we think of the Supreme Court. So we've got the President, Congress, and the Supreme Court. Looking at this chart, I'm going to go through and see what I see. U.S. Congress, that's the legislative body. State legislators, state legislatures, that's the legislative body at the state level. So we have our U.S. Congress, and then we have state legislatures or Congress, like we have the state Senate and the state House of Representatives, just like we have the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House of Representatives. So we've got, these legislatures at the national level, and then each state also has a legislature, but it's still part of the legislative branch. Okay. Congress, same thing, legislative branch. Ratification convention, that's none of the branches. That's actually a convention where representatives are elected to go and attend and vote. So that's none of the branches. We've got legislatures, that's legislative body branch. More legislatures, and more ratification convention, which is again neither of the branches. So the only branch I am seeing here is actually the legislative branch, which is just one government branch. I feel like this is a really good answer choice, but let's continue to make sure that We don't like any of the other ones. So, answer choice B, only one legislative body can conclude the amendment process. Now, conclusion is here in step 2. So, this is step 1 is the creation over here of an amendment. So, this is where they first create the idea for an amendment, and it has to pass. For example, one method here, there's 4 different ways, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 different ways that an amendment can be passed, and each one has 2 steps. The first step is where it sort of is created. So this method, it has to pass in both houses of the US Congress with at least a 2/3 vote. And then the step 2 is concluding. Why is it not letting me write? I'm trying to write the word conclusion there and it's not letting me write it. I'm going to write it down here maybe. Okay, so step 2 is to conclude the process. Create the process, step 1. Step 2, conclude the process. So choice B is talking about the conclusion, which is these here in step 2. And if we look at method 1, it relies on the state legislature voting on it. Method 2, though, relies on a ratification convention. So there is a way to conclude the process using the second method that does not involve the legislative body or the legislative branch of government. And so answer choice B is not correct, because there are actually 2 different ways that you can conclude the process, if that makes sense. Answer choice C, only state legislatures are involved in the amendment process. Well, no, US Congress is the national legislative body. State legislatures are involved, but so is the national level legislative branch. So that is not true. We can cross off C. And the last one, D, only state governments can start the amendment process. Well, if we look at method 1 up here, a 2/3 vote in both houses of the US Congress, that's not state legislate. That's not the state government legislative branch. That's the national legislative branch. And so answer choice D is not correct either. So that means that answer choice A, which we originally thought looked good, is the correct answer for this question.